Hey everyone, welcome to today's edition of One Single Story, where each weekday we offer a brief lesson from a section of today's reading, then we examine a single relevant question that passage points us to. Today I'm joined by Sharon Schwartz, and we're looking at a passage from Psalm 74, verses 12 through 23. Yesterday we talked about God having his hands in his pocket, and it's this appeal for God to act. We observed how God's inactivity seems to be interpreted here as rejection, and that this is a model prayer that God would somehow become active. And in the psalm, we can find three reasons upon which we base our appeal for God to move for us. And the first is God has the power to move. The psalmist runs through this list of things he has done. In verse 13, he split the sea. And this might be a reference either to Genesis 1:9, the dividing of the waters, or the dividing of the Red Sea. We're not sure. Verse 14, he says, you crushed the heads of Leviathan. That's this mythical sea creature that sometimes represents Egypt, and other times it refers to Satan, but in this context, it more likely represents Egypt. Verse 15, he says, you caused dry land to appear in the waters again. This could be a reference to the Red Sea or a creation, either one. He says, verse 16, you control the light of the sun. Verse 17, you control the seasons of the earth, winter and summer. The point of listing these things was not to describe what God can do, but to describe reasons why God should move. He should move because he has the power to do so. And then he says, the second reason is God has a covenant with his people. The psalmist appeals to God, for God to remember his covenant with Israel in verse 20. God has described himself as a God who is faithful to his promises and that he can't lie. And his promise is to preserve and protect Israel must be kept for the sake of that covenant. The covenant must be kept. And then the last reason why he appeals to God and says God should act is God's name and his reputation is at stake. Verses 18 and 22, he says he appeals to God to defend his cause and defend himself against the insults of the enemy. You see, the reputation of Israel is tied together with the reputation of God himself, because God made a covenant with Abraham and the children of Israel. The condition and situation of the people became this reflection upon the reputation of God. And so, Sharon, let's talk about a couple of things. Do you think God has characterized himself as one who will move for his people? Do you believe?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. All through the scripture, I see it, and in my life, I see it. You know, there's no doubt in my mind he's my number one warrior.
So if he is a God who moves for his people, why do you think sometimes it takes him so long?
Whatever the timing is for my good and his glory. I believe that. I think it's and this wasn't a terrible long, but it was an example. Back last year, that was a year ago last month, when I woke up and started realizing I had health issues in the middle of August. Anyway, so coming, there was some things. Anyway, eventually I was told I had to have a liver transplant, which was strange because I've never drank maybe 2 drinks in my life. Never done drugs, never. And here I've got cirrhosis. Where did that come from?
So one, I'd never heard of that.
What?
Non-alcohol cirrhosis
NASH.
of the liver.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I never heard of it. But I have a friend whose daughter-in-law, his son is a youth pastor. He serves on staff at a church. And his son is in his 40s. His wife is in her 40s. And she has non-alcohol cirrhosis of the liver, and apparently is near death. Like, she really needs some help right now. I can't get the transplant right this minute.
There's a woman in Elizabeth City. Her husband is the president of a university over there, Christian University, and she's the same way. Now I hear everybody, but I had never heard of it either, because when they said the word, I'm like, that's not possible.
Yeah, Sharon's a closet drinker. That's the first thing I thought.
Well, my thought was like, how is that even possible? But anyway, and I had a sister that died of cirrhosis, but from the traditional way, whatever.
Drinking
so
alcoholic way.
Alcohol and drugs, yeah. But anyway, we went through the process, which was quicker than I could have imagined. We went to Richmond for 3 or 4 days and got through the process. Anyway, the next week they rushed it because the next Tuesday they were going to have their board committee or whatever to decide who gets on the transplant. And apparently that's like once a month, every 6 weeks or something. And they wanted my application there. So anyway, one of the doctors I had not seen who they prefer was the nutritionist doctor to get on the transplant. But they had me see a hospital nutritionist to click the box. But he still wanted me to see this one to follow protocol. And so we went up. Carrie took me up that Wednesday. Now, so that Wednesday was the day after the board had met. And on the way up, getting ready to walk in the doctor's office, I got the call. I'm on the transplant list. First time? Are you kidding me? That was unheard of. So anyway, we were praising and rejoicing. I get into the doctor, and I hadn't felt good all day, and they took my blood pressure, and it was like 70/42. She said, get to the hospital. She said, I'd call an ambulance, but it'll take me longer to get an ambulance here than you to get in the car and get to the hospital. So we did. And they immediately put me in ICU, and my liver doctor came in, and he said, if I have my way, you won't leave here without a liver. Thanksgiving would have been a week the next day away. So anyway, automatically the girls, Sharon and Carrie, got figuring that I had to have my transplant by Thanksgiving Day in order to be out at least at Richmond Hospital so the grandkids could see me Christmas. So we started praying, Lord, she needs that surgery by Thursday. She needs that liver by Wednesday, 1 week. And we even shared it with people at church and stuff. And the girls, Carrie stayed with me. Sharon was here and was saying, we're asking God to give her a liver by next Wednesday. And they came in a couple of times and, so we've got a liver we're looking at. Well, it didn't work. And you're always in news today, So finally, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving at 5:15, they were moving me to another room, and I got a phone call. Well, first, let me tell you, my nurse came in, said, I think we have you a liver. Don't tell. And I said, why? He said, there's something review, and they scheduled the operating room for tomorrow. He said, that's what that should mean. So anyway, a few minutes later, they said, we've got you a liver. Exactly the day we were asking. And so Sharon went to church that night. We were still doing Bible study. Told everybody, looks like Mom's got a liver. We're going up. It was perfect. It was done. So as I'm sitting there and we're talking as a family before the surgery, because all the kids came up and we stayed up all night talking and just loving on each other. Why didn't he do it 3 days before that other liver? I truly believe it's because we have shared with people, we're asking God for a liver by this Wednesday so she can have the surgery by Thanksgiving so she can be out of the hospital by Christmas. And people laughed. And I understand, I probably would have too, because there's people still when I go to clinic waiting on a liver that were sicker than I ever was.
Been on there longer than you.
Longer than me. God had a plan.
And it's hard to explain to those folks either.
It is.
Why you get to cut line. That's what I heard somebody describe favor as that way. It's getting moved to the front of the line. And you don't deserve it.
No, I don't deserve it, but he's got work for me. And that's why once I knew that whole process, if the surgeon had come in and say, there's 99.9% you're not going to make it through this surgery, I'm going to say, buddy, I'm gambling on the one. Because God had worked it too perfect, every part of it. From me seeing the world-renowned specialist in NASH cirrhosis, that was a fluke. All the way through, God had directed that path. And if I had ever taken my eyes off of it, if I had ever said, well, maybe I need a second opinion, maybe I should go to Duke or Chapel Hill, that's that slippery slope we talked about a few days ago.
Well, and then you're not dependent on God.
I'm not. He was so obvious. I felt like he was pushing the wheelchair through the hospital. It was so, and when switching rooms, I'm hyped because I'm getting a liver transplant. I was telling everybody, Jesus came through for the liver, and it sort of was known throughout the hospital. Nurses came in and said, "Oh, you have to pray in. You have to, that God works a miracle." Absolutely.
Well, thank you for joining us today on this edition of One Single Story. We hope you'll be back with us tomorrow as we continue a conversation around the book of Psalms.